Yes, good morning, good afternoon, depending to where you are. We are going to start the call, and we are going to have a word praying for us. Award, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Yes, can you pray for us, please?
Okay, ngatinamate tenzi Mwari Baba tokutendai nechipo choupenyu, tokutendai nezuva irori ranhasi. Tauya pachigaro chenyu panguva dzino dzemasikati. Vaine Mwari Baba patakutanga musangano uno. Komborai wese ari pane uno musangano muve munotiropafadza zvese zvaitwa tigowanikwa mazita akanyorwa mubhuku reupenyu. Ndanamata tenzi zvisina munembiri yenyu inogara nekusingaperi. Amen.
Yes, thank you very much. We are going to start our call. We are going to start with spokespersons. The first one is Derry Anthony. Derry Anthony, can you hear us?
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to give report about activities that went on in the Ghana group within the week. As usual, members who attended last week's Zoom meeting were thanked and asked to confirm the attendance for today's meeting. Those who were not able to attend last week's meeting were encouraged to do their best to attend this week's on. Those who haven't attended the Pan-African and Health Weekend classes with Dr. Wright and Nana Kuya, respectively, were encouraged to do well and attend in order to know much about Pan-Africanism and also our health. Again, newsletters for the week was kept on the group, and members encouraged to write their newsletters so that it will be added next time. Furthermore, we were reminded to identify and recommend Black-owned and Black-friendly businesses. The format for business recommendation was added. Last but not least, we were reminded of writing weekly reports about activities that went on in the group within the week. COVID-19 updates in Ghana. Ghana has recorded a total of 122,779 cases since the emergence of COVID-19. Out of this, the active cases are 5,355. The number of recoveries are 116,337. And the deaths recorded since the emergence of COVID-19 so far are 1,087. Derry Anthony reporting from Ghana. I am because we are. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Derry Anthony from Ghana. Up next, we have Zoe Owusu. Zoe Owusu, can you hear us?
Yes, please. Can you also hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. Good day. I love Black people. This is Ghana chapter weekly reports dated 10th of September. That's from 4th September to 10th September 2021. Summary of activities. We started our Saturday's conference meeting by enjoying our usual spokespersons report on the weekly activities in their respective countries and groups. This was accompanied by our honorable co-founder, most Ambassador Christopher Mapondere's speech. Our most edutainment Pan-African class and health class sessions were delivered by Professor Dr. Terren Wright and Queen Mother Nana Ekuya Nzenzeli, a traditional healer and founder of the Natural Path Holistic Wellness Center. Our regular Tuesday newsletters, which highlights on education, health, legal, finance, transportation, beauty, food and accommodation, and other Black-owned and Black-friendly content was enjoyed. Members were encouraged to submit their contributions on Thursdays for review and publishing in the newsletter. I Love Black People members were encouraged to follow, like, retweet, and comment on the various social media platforms of the group. That's WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and the others. Our honorable ambassadors were grouped on task base to help affect the mission and vision of the group. We advise every active member and ambassador to embark on our group activities and contribute to the various I Love Black People activities in protection against racism and xenophobia. Members and ambassadors are reminded to submit Black-owned and Black-friendly businesses to the group's website with formats provided in our various groups. We join hands. Sorry, I think. Okay. We join hands with our brothers and sisters all over the world facing any form of distress, xenophobic attacks, and racism, with encouragement, relief, hope, and love messages accompanied with some donations into the Haiti earthquake Guado Relief 2021 on our website. I Love Black People members, family, and friends are to use our emergency button located at the bottom left of the iloveblackpeople.com website. In the heat, fight, or protection against racism and xenophobic attacks wherever you find yourself. Members who went against the group's mission, objectives, and goals were penalized and informed to stick to the group's mission, objectives, and goals only if they want to enjoy their membership. Ambassadors and members in our country group made time to help all new members with their challenges with the weekly tasks, and we encourage everyone to seek for clarification and assistance when the need arises. I Love Black People members, that's old and new, are once again encouraged to stick to the I Love Black People mission and contribute only to the fight against racism and xenophobic attacks. In our country group, members who weren't able to attend the Zoom conference call session on last week Saturday were encouraged to do so this time, and further recommend others by sharing the link to this Saturday's meeting. Quote of the week: you must never be fearful about what you are doing when it is right. You must never be fearful about what you are doing when it is right. Rosa Parks Meyer, an American civil rights activist. Ghana Weekly COVID-19 updates is made available by the link below. Live it, love it. You are Black, we are Black. I love Black people. I am because we are. Reporting Zoe Owusu Agbe, Patrice Lumumba Ambassador. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Zoe Owusu. Up next, we have Elijah Yambuti from Uganda. Elijah Yambuti, can you hear us? Elijah Yambuti, can you hear us? Okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, you only have 1 minute to present the report.
Okay. I will report from Mozambique. Yeah, the report is dated 5th September 2021 to 10th September 2021. The country weekly report activities are: on 4th September 2021, the community had a Zoom meeting where we had a class session with Dr. Tyreen Wright and Nana Akwa Senzele. A regular newsletter was shared which highlights on 8 essential categories: education, health, legal, finance, transportation, beauty, food, and accommodation. Announcement was made to all members to volunteer as ambassadors of I Love Black People. Social media accounts of I Love Black People was shared to groups, and the members were encouraged to follow, like, and comment in all platforms. On 7th September 2021, the community celebrated the Victory Day, the day that we were signed the Lusaka Agreement 1974 between Frelimo and the Portuguese state. Those were the agreement that led the country to independence. On 10th September 2021, the community celebrated with our brothers and sisters, happy Independence Day of Guinea-Bissau, which got her independence on 10th September 1974 from the Portuguese. The community members from different countries were asked to prepare and write and submit weekly reports. The COVID-19 updates in Mozambique. The total confirmed cases are 148,727. The deaths are 1,891. The recoveries are 140,641. The report was made by Nana Karina from Mozambique. I am because we are.
Yes, thank you very much, Elijah Yambuti. Up next, you have Andrew Magombo from Malawi. Andrew Magombo, can you hear us? Andrew Magombo, can you hear us? Okay, I think maybe he has a problem with the network. Up next, we have Roland Gassam. Roland Gassam, can you hear us? Roland Gassam, can you hear us? Okay, I think maybe we also have a problem with the network. And we continue with Felipe Jr. Felipe Jr., can you hear us? Felipe Jr., can you hear us? We are going to continue with Mr. Mapondera.
Hello, greetings people. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You only
Greetings,
have
everyone.
1 minute.
Thank you, brothers and sisters in this panel. So I'm going to report. I will give you the weekly report from Burkina Faso, which is, but first let me say that we have been working so hard in order to support our members, to invite other members and recommend business, black-owned or friendly business. And it's been tough to us, but we are trying to do all the effort in order to achieve our goals. Unfortunately, we have a lack of participants. We don't know what's going on, but we try our best in order to have the results here. But Burkina Faso, we have a weekly report that they have been also collecting some information, taking an organization discussing about racism and the xenophobia. All the members of the government are being back from the government income. In terms of COVID-19, the global situation, at the date 8th September, total, we have 13,906 total. So deaths, we have 171. Recoveries, we have 13,519. And active cases, we have 138. So this report was sent or was submitted from Tindu Coffee from Burkina Faso. I love Black people. I am because we are. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Felipe Jr. Up next, we have Mr. Mapondera. Mr. Mapondera, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Wherever you are, it's always a pleasure to meet on these Saturdays. I requested, that maybe today we could change our format just a little bit. I want to know from as many of you as possible if you have any Pan-African news that you picked up during the week. If you can post them there, and then maybe I can try to address them. Maybe try to interpret what they mean and also hear what your own views are. Can I have any postings on what some of you consider to be significant Pan-African news to share with us today? Is there anybody? No news? Okay, maybe let me just kick off, whilst others are also trying to come up with their views. Okay, to me, for this, as I mentioned last time, to be a true Pan-Africanist, you really need to know what is happening in the Pan-African world as well. So that we are not in isolation. What happened to any one of us, regardless of which part of the continent you are at or which part of the world you are at, it affects all of us. At times we don't seem to make the connection between what happens to Black people in America with what happens to Black people in Latin America, in Brazil, Honduras, Mexico, or to Black people in Australia or in China. I think maybe a good example was when we saw all those horrific stories, for Black people being abused in China. I think the whole of Africa, the whole African world raised their concerns, and the Chinese got the message, and that stuff stopped right there and there. Okay, that just shows that when we know what is happening amongst us, we can collectively take action and make a big difference. The action that all of us took, regardless of which part of the world we live in, against the brutalization of Africans in China, helped, and that was stopped. So this could happen anywhere. Right now, probably we don't have as much information on what is going on in Latin America, but we also hear some stories of how some of our Black people are abused in those countries. So it is very, very important that we must keep abreast on what is going on, in our world. To me, the three items that I would say were of significance, that took place in the Pan-African world this week was, one, the coup that took place in Guinea-Conakry. When you read the news, in terms of the people who staged that coup, one, they were trained by the French, but they were also trained by the Americans. And the leader of the coup was actually invited by the president that he deposed to come and help him, set up, some military functions and so forth. Then the second item that took place was in the DRC. There was a video circulating around where it is alleged the DRC for the first time discovered a group of Chinese who were mining, doing mining activities right in the middle of the forest, and they had been there for years, and the DRC government didn't know anything about it. Now, when that was done, the DRC decided they were going to revise all the contracts that they have with the Chinese. And then the third item is that the Tanzanian government just ratified the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is also a good thing. I'll also comment on that. Now, with these three incidences, they represent a number of scenarios that I think we need to spend a little bit more time. At times, things don't seem to be what they are until you really dig deep inside. For instance, with the Guinea, the most perplexing thing that when the deposed president came into power, masses rejoiced. They were so happy that he got into power. They thought he was going to redeem them from whatever situation they were facing. And then when he was deposed this time, same people go out into the streets rejoicing, you know, that he has been removed from power. And it seemed that they were happy that, you know, the military took over and so forth. But the thing is, how do the same people rejoice when the deposed president came into power, and then they also rejoice when he's taken out of power? To me, it signifies two things. One is that our institutions of managing our politics are not as strong as they should be. There should be a need to have a coup in order to change a president. If we say, you know, each president can be in office for a term of 5 years, maybe he's allowed 2 terms, and when those 2 terms are over, that's that. You know, he should not be contesting. Let somebody else, you know, be voted into place. But I understand the deposed president was now trying to manipulate the situation so that he can stay an additional term of office. But now, why was it necessary, you know, that the army steps in? And the relationship that this army has, you know, with the various countries that I've mentioned, again, that really brings into question what role do those countries play, if any, in terms of the change of government. Quite often, when there's a coup, the United States and the Europeans, they are the first ones to come and they condemn those coups, and they will impose sanctions against, you know, the people who have committed those coups and so forth. But in this case, not a single word came out of these same countries. Then you get to wonder what is going on. I'm not going to speculate on that, but nevertheless, it's something that as a Pan-Africanist, you really want to spend some time and analyze, you know, and do more research, you know, find out what the other specialists in this type of situation are saying about it, what are the analysis of what is going on. But what is of interest is that the Guinea-Conakry has got probably the second largest iron ore deposits in the world. Their existence and not being under the control of any superpowers becomes a threat to them, because the industries of any nation still depends on the availability of iron ore in the production of steel and so forth. The next, the second highest producer for iron ore is Australia. But we also know the relationship between Australia and the or European powers. So that when they see a situation where it may destabilize the Australian economy, then, you know, they find ways of trying to have their friends influence situations, you know, in the possible or potential competitors. Then you come to the situation in the DRC. Again, there are a number of factors that I was looking at. You know, one is that either our security systems are still very much weak. There are so many stories of, because of the size of the DRC, that there are a lot of things that happen of which the government may not even know, particularly in the illicit movement of minerals out of DRC. The country is just so big, and the security system, you know, is not adequate enough to be able to check on most of these things. Let alone that some of these activities are also aided and abetted by some of our own people for a little bit of money. Then they try to make it possible for these outside forces to come and exploit our resources. Now, those kinds of situations also really defines what our understanding as Black people are. It means we're still not liberated, in our minds. We still have that the colonial suppression and oppression is still with us, that we still don't appreciate our own value, we don't appreciate our resources, and we don't see a situation where we can operate independent of any outside forces. So that we use our power in office, whether we are civil servants or as politicians and so forth, to mortgage our resources at the expense of development of our own people. One question that I had was that the Chinese had come up with a program, I believe about $6 billion with DRC, where in exchange for minerals, the Chinese are going to build the infrastructure, roads, schools, hospitals, and so forth, which to me appears to be quite a fair deal. And this is how the Chinese have operated in many cases, whilst some of the things they do are totally unacceptable. But I think the one thing that has distinguished the Chinese from the former colonizers we had is that the Chinese will help you to put in the infrastructure, because they know without the infrastructure, you cannot effectively exploit your own resources. Two, building up of hospitals. If you don't have good health, you're not going to have a good population, a healthy population, to undertake your day-to-day activities. Building schools, definitely when you're not educated in terms of having knowledge. Some people equate being educated as being, understanding, Western civilization and Western ways of living. No, to me, being educated is being able to understand, the basic sciences. Science has no nationality. If you understand physics, if you know engineering, if you know logic and all those kind of things, they have no religion, or do they have any nationality. So these are the skills that we need, in order to develop our own country. So I find that the Chinese more or less help to develop those particular skills. You need the infrastructure, you need the roads, the bridges, and so forth. Whereas our former colonizers, they only looked after themselves. You'd have a situation where there could be one farmer who is 200 kilometers away, and they will get a telephone line. That is in the olden days when they used to have this, copper lines, transmitting, voice and so forth. So they would have that. The telephone lines go 200 kilometers to meet the needs of one farmer, but there would be hundreds and thousands of people in between who would not benefit from the presence of that telephone line. But fortunately, with the advent of cell phones and so forth, that technology became archaic. So these are some of the things that will also help us leapfrog some of the development stages that we need to catch up with the rest of the world, and also changing the lifestyles of our people. I think we're going to have to depend and rely on technology more than anything else. So you look at the two scenarios, where one is saying, okay, I'll exchange minerals for developing your people, for developing your infrastructure and so forth. Now, the problem with that scenario, as far as other people are concerned, is that, if the Chinese are going to have access to these minerals, they're going to be controlling the cobalt that comes out of it. They'll be able to mine more cobalt out of DRC, they'll be able to mine this and that and so forth, and we are going to be subjected to limitations by them. So what is the best thing? Let's show the DRC where all this illegal mining supposedly is taking place and say, okay, look, this is what is going on. I think you better change and revise all your contracts with the Chinese. So on one hand, you're saying, oh yeah, the DRC has done the right thing to stop all these things and so forth. Yeah, but also at the same time, there could be some other underlying factors where a hidden hand somewhere saying, no, I think you better stop what these guys are doing for you, you do it our way and so forth. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the codes in Guinea, Conakry also leaves a lot to be desired, who is behind it, what is really, is it just the military has come to the aid of the people who are fed up of what the president was doing and so forth, or there's something else? So that's what I have today. If you have any questions, I'm also looking for some comments, but I think that is, what I have. Again, as I say, that as a Pan-Africanist, you really need to understand what is going on in your world and be able to analyze what does it all mean. Okay, thank you. Anything else, Yvonne?
Yes, there is someone who is asking what are the implications for the change in Chinese policy on Africa?
Well, the change in policy by the Chinese, I don't know what policy. Did he make it much clearer than that?
No, he only was showing the policy in general.
Well, I like I said quite often, that the Chinese should really not dictate what policy they should have on Africa, as much as we as Africans must be able to determine what we want our relationship with them should be. Okay? Right now, because we seem to think we're at the receiving end, we are more or less like, going around with our balls in hands, begging, that they can say, okay, yes, I'll give you this on condition to do this and so forth. But because we don't understand our own strength on the basis of the resources that we have, on the basis of even our market, 1.4 billion people, that is one of the largest single markets in the world. I mean, second, maybe the Chinese will become number 2, the Indians maybe number 3 and so forth. Okay, so that's a very, very big market in itself that has got major economic implications, for the whole world anyway. Okay, so it's not for the Chinese to change their policies, but we must determine what our policies should be towards the Chinese people and how we want them to interact with us. Okay, anybody else?
Yes. Also, Robert Kasivuru is asking why can't we reach to the achievement of acquiring at least a piece of land in every African country. This will bring together the brothers of that very country to have a common goal.
Go over that again, sorry.
Yes. Why can't we reach to the achievement acquiring at least a piece of land in every African country? This will bring together the brothers of that very country to have a common goal.
No, but I mean, depending on each country, that from many African countries that I've traveled to, there's not that strong relationship, between ownership of land and having title to it and so forth. It seems you can still talk to your local chief, or you can talk to your local authority to have access to land. It's really for yourselves, to organize yourselves, to say, okay, we need to have this much piece of land to do this and that and so forth. So So if you come up with your own proposals, then there's no need for the government, to say, okay, the Arabs have come, they want, 20,000 hectares, let's give it to them. They will do so because, the Arabs will have come up with a plan. So we have to do the same thing for our own countries as well. Come up with a plan, to show your own government that, look, if you give us 10,000 hectares, we can be able to produce enough food to feed our people and so forth. So I think that if that can be done in every African countries, yes, I mean, I know that in some places that has already started happening anyway. Is that a guy, the hand up? JMVA with that. He's waving his hand. Did you just see them?
Yes, he can write his comment or question in the comment section. And
Or is he wanting to say something? You can allow him to say something if he wants to say something.
he's going to write in the comment section.
Oh,
And that was all the questions that we had for today.
okay, anyways, thank you so much. And we'll meet next week. And we have another interesting and exciting topic to talk about. Just final thing, can Africa define its own way of democratic rule? Definitely. We have to come up with our own definition, of what democracy is. Okay? Because each country right now, all the so-called democratic countries, they are doing the same thing. I mean, the British have their own thing. Yeah, the Americans have their own thing. Even in America, as much as they say they are a democratic nation, they're busy putting out laws that make it difficult, for others to vote. They're doing all kinds of funny things. So is that still democracy? I don't think so. British have the same thing, the Italians, whatever, and so forth. So we have to define our own democracy. Yes, that's the only way to go. Okay, I think it's for Sister Amana Simos got something, but I think my time is up. Next time, Madam Yvonne, maybe you give us an additional extra 10 minutes. It seems 15 minutes is not sufficient. By the time I'm about to finish, then everybody is quite awake and they want to start participating. So I think we can rectify that in the future. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Bye, guys. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I hope you are learning something out of what I say, but I want to again continue to get your feedback so that we can live the Africa that we want. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mapondera, for your time.
Okay.
Yes. Up next, we have Nana Akua. Nana Akua, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Good afternoon. Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone.
Yes, good afternoon.
Happy to see all you beautiful Black people this morning. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening in on the second week of the Pan-African Healthcare class. Today, we are talking about herbs, homeopathic remedies, essential oils, and superfoods. So hopefully you were able to review the handouts about these things. And I want to share my screen if I may.
Yes, you are allowed to share your screen.
Okay. So let's get right into it. So we know that last week we spoke about what holistic health or what holistic medicine is. We, spoke about the different natural healing modalities, some holistic principles, nutrition, and now we're going to specifically talk about the holistic modality of herbal medicine. So we know that God has created all these wonderful healing plants throughout the planet. So no matter where you are in the world, there are indigenous plants that are used for our healing and our well-being. So I want to go through the handout that's here for folk who are in sort of the Western side of the world, but then a handout that I think I will revise the handouts to include some herbs, some African herbs, because I know that a good part of the class are continental Africans, and then a number of us are diasporic Africans that may be in the Americas or elsewhere. So I know that not everyone can access these herbs that I will start with, but hopefully some of the other ones that I'll list. And actually you may find that some of these are even on this list, as a matter of fact. Actually, so I think I'll point out the ones that should be found on the continent. And I understand the continent is a huge and vast place. So even there, you may not in every part of it find every herb. These I think are typically West African and South African herbs. But at any point, again, my goal is to empower Black people to heal themselves naturally, to be able to address health concerns or complaints, especially those kind of nuisance complaints that don't need emergency care. And then just in many cases, avoid illness and just keep your immune systems up, avoid certain typical illnesses or conditions that Black people, may traditionally, acquire. We want to avoid those things if we can. So we want to know what herbs can heal the body, what they do, what nutrition they provide, and that sort of thing. So let's start here with alfalfa. I was just speaking to someone earlier today, and they were talking about their wife feeling really fatigued and not doing well, sore, achy, just really not feeling well. And it appeared from the information provided that she could benefit from minerals. We know that minerals help provide energy to the body. And a lot of times we focus on vitamins like vitamin B and some other things for energy, but minerals are key for energy as well. And if you recall last week, we know that minerals also deal with connective tissue and joints and bone. And we know that when we feel achy and sore and physically tired, sometimes minerals are the answer. So alfalfa is one of those herbs that is extremely nutritive. It has a lot of vitamins, a lot of minerals, trace elements, protein. It's a very rich herb. Definitely something that can be used across the board as a multivitamin, so to speak. It has a number of the minerals that one would need that you may typically take separately. So alfalfa is sort of a super herb. We also know that traditionally it's used for arthritis, for bleeding disorders, and menopause, among other things, right? So alfalfa is definitely one that I would highlight here from this list. Another one that I'll talk about is Buchu. Buchu is a herb found on the continent, definitely in West African countries. So this hopefully is accessible to a lot of people and hopefully maybe not just in the western part of the continent. But Buchu is good for urinary conditions, kidney issues, things like bladder weakness or urinary tract infection, inflammation. It's an excellent diuretic, so it'll get rid of excess fluids from the body. And if there's just some issue with the urinary tract, it acts as an antiseptic. So Buchu is very strong, very powerful. Definitely something you should take note of. Good for high blood pressure, arthritis, gout, urinary tract infections. I think I already mentioned that. Just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. Yes. High blood pressure is not on this list, but we know that if there is a herb that is good for the kidneys, we know that it will also be good for regulating blood pressure as well, okay? So the next one that I'll mention is burdock. And let me just say, let me see if I can increase this, because I know, oh yeah, this will help. And hopefully you can see it as I'm seeing it, right? So hopefully this is a little better. My aging eyes, I'm finding myself kind of squinting a little bit here. But burdock. Burdock is a blood purifier. The root of burdock plant is what is used that has the most healing powers in it. But burdock is a blood purifier. It's used for arthritis, rheumatism, sciatica, skin problems. It cleanses the blood, cleanses the liver. So we know anything that cleanses the blood cleanses the liver, and vice versa. We know if something is a liver cleanser, we know that it's going to affect the blood. And it's also going to heal the skin. Okay, they all kind of work hand in hand there. And burdock is really high in iron. So back to the person that I mentioned earlier, who is possibly lacking some minerals. We've already talked about alfalfa, that would be good for some minerals. Now we're at burdock, because burdock is specifically good for iron. So another mineral that probably would help this person gain some more energy, relieve some pain and aches in the body. Another herb that I would like to mention here, so many, I'm trying to pick just one. Let's talk about Cascara Sagrada. So Cascara Sagrada is an herbal laxative. So it helps tonify the colon or the large intestines, right? So it will help move the bowels. If the bowels have become sluggish from constipation, from poor diet, from not going regularly, Cascara Sagrada acts as a stimulant. So it will help the peristalsis, that's the movement that the colon makes, right? To move waste out, right? If it has gotten sluggish because of poor bowel habits, constipation, for example, then Cascara Sagrada helps stimulate it and get it back on track to where it will work and move in the way that it should to relieve the bowels, okay? Let's talk about dandelion. Dandelion is a very well-known liver cleanser. Here, you know, in the States, it grows wild. A lot of people consider it sort of just a nuisance weed, but it is an edible healing weed. It's a blood purifier. It's high in calcium and iron, right? So again, back to anyone who needs extra minerals in the body, dandelion is going to be an excellent source. It acts as a mild laxative, and it also is a diuretic. So now we also see that it's good for the kidneys, right? Because we know that anything that relieves or releases water and fluid waste from the body, we know is going to impact the kidneys as well. So it's good for the liver and the kidneys. It's good for hepatitis and for high blood pressure. And as you see, it's noted here, the roasted root of dandelion is also used in a coffee substitute. They usually add chicory and some other, you know, things. Dandelion and chicory are well known for being coffee substitutes. So if you're trying to get rid of coffee, roasted dandelion root may assist with that and give you some really vital nutrients as well. Another one I'll mention, devil's claw. Also found on the continent. It is an indigenous herb to South Africa, Botswana, and Namibia. I don't know if anybody here on the call is from these areas, but Devil's claw is a great pain reliever. It's an anti-inflammatory. It's used for joint inflammation. So arthritis, gout, even things like fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome, those types of pain, devil's claw is great for. Diabetes and headaches and menstrual problems is also used for. So devil's claw is another one I would definitely add to your list of herbs to try to have on hand. And at the very least, you're now familiar with them if you've not heard of them before. Another one I'd like to mention is Echinacea. Echinacea is a blood cleanser or purifier. It's also good for the lymphatic system. So we know because of that reason, it helps us with our immune function, right? Because our lymph is what fights off infection in the body, okay? Echinacea is probably most notably known for treating the cold and flu, but also it's good for allergies. It's also good for sore throats. Topically, you can use Echinacea. This is not on here, but because it increases the white blood cells in the body and on the skin, it's excellent for cuts, scrapes, even snake bites, insect bites, things like that. It aids in the healing on the skin as well. Let's skip to ginger. Ginger would be another one of those that is pretty much found throughout the world. You will find it on the continent, you'll find it in India, you'll find it in Asia, and it does grow here in the US as well. Ginger is a stimulant. It aids in digestion and increases appetite. It is good for flatulence, colds, flu. It's good for nausea, any kind of motion sickness, sea, air, car, what have you. And we know that ginger is good for sore throat and probably a plethora of other, things. We know that topically, ginger can be used for helping to reduce fever. A co-teacher wants to wants to talk, so I had to shut the door. The ginger baths are great for reducing fever. We are known to use it in full body baths as well as foot baths. So if you have aches and pains physically from, say, the flu, ginger is excellent to take a bath in. And again, it also helps reduce fever when you have those conditions as well. Golden seal is another one I'll skip down to, popular for treating colds and flu. It's a natural antibiotic, antiseptic, fights off infection. This also stimulates digestion and appetite, right? And it helps remove excess mucus from the body. And a lot of times people who eat a lot of meat or dairy products, even if you don't obviously have excessive amounts of mucus, you will just from having those types of foods in your diet. So it's a good idea if you consume meat to do something like golden seal that will remove any excess mucus from the body. This will create problems like sinus infections, hay fever, allergies, head congestion, colds, things of that nature. It's also great for topical skin conditions, rashes, cuts, scrapes, things like that. So golden seal is sort of one of those to have. Probably one of the ones that if you couldn't have any other herb or very few herbs, golden seal should be in the number. It should be included. So golden seal is excellent. Skipping down a bit, and I'm an herbalist, you all. I'm first a herbalist, so always going through this is always a challenge because I kind of want to talk about every herb. I just think herbs are so important and they're so wonderful. Thank God for herbs. I don't want to overlook anything, but I have to, right? So I'm trying, I'm doing good. Mullein is another herb that, let me try to enlarge this a bit also, right? So if you see mullein here, mullein is excellent to use around this time of respiratory issues, right? Because it's an expectorant. So it's great for opening the airways, the nasal passages, the bronchi, the lungs. So it's good for congestion, asthma, earaches, cough, colds, flu, all of those types of things. Mullein is definitely excellent to have. Indigenous here to the States, it was traditionally used by Native Americans here on the continent of here, and was often used for these types of lung and respiratory conditions. Not sure if it is found in other parts of the world, but hopefully you can access it. Nettle is another herb that I really like a lot. It is really rich in minerals again. Going back to the example earlier, this one is high in iron, silica, and potassium, right? So we know someone who maybe has blood pressure issues or anemia and things of that, this is great for. But nettle is also really, really good for allergies. If you suffer from sinus infections, hay fever, allergies, things of that nature, any kind of food or environmental allergies, nettle is great for. Nettle is also, because of its high mineral content, is excellent for the skin and hair, but specifically the hair. It helps with baldness and dandruff. So I make hair food, shampoo, hair rinse, hair conditioner, all of these things I use nettle in. So nettle is really, really good for hair products. Scrolling down a bit, let me mention Partiarco. So if you see Partiarco here, Partiarco, and this is another sort of Native American herb, because it's known by other names, Mapacho and Tahibo. But this is great for yeast or candida infections. It's good also for fungal, bacterial, and viral infections. So a lot of the microorganisms that cause disease, Partiarco is excellent for, right? So it boosts the immune system because of that. And it's an excellent blood purifier, okay? So any infections, any possible infections, Partiarco is great for. Another one that I'd like to point out is red raspberry. Most people only consider red raspberry a female herb or an herb for women. However, red raspberry is highly nutritive. It's another one of those sort of super herbs because it has a lot of vitamins and minerals in it. I think that's from lesson 1. If you go back to that list that gives the vitamin and mineral content of different foods and herbs, red raspberry is one of those that you will see over and over again that has multiple vitamins and minerals in it, okay? But most notably, people use it during pregnancy. It helps strengthen the reproductive system, relieves nausea, prevents premature labor, miscarriage, and improves milk production. But again, it's also a highly nutritive herb. So definitely a woman in childbearing years, this is a good herb to include. And if I want to scroll up, I want to also mention St. John's wort. St. John's wort is most notably known for depression, treating depression, but it's also a strong antiviral, okay? So it's excellent, excellent for viral conditions of any kind, including herpes. Very common condition, but it's good for killing or removing viruses from the body. And seems completely unrelated, but herbs sometimes work this way, where it'll have 10 things that it do and they may seem all unrelated. So in addition to being a strong antiviral, if you're suffering from depression, sadness, sorrow, things of that nature, you just need sort of a pick-me-up, you're stressed, you're overwhelmed, St. John's wort is also excellent for that. And typically what we want are herbs that have multiple uses. The way to kind of choose which herbs to take is to pick herbs that will address several conditions that you have. And you will always find herbs that will do multiple things. Now, not every condition will you have. And, you know, thank goodness this is how herbs work. If it does 10 things and you only have 1 or 2 of those conditions, you don't have to worry about the other 8. If your body doesn't need it for that condition, then it won't use it. It will use it for what you need it for, okay? And then the last one I'll mention here is valerian, one of my favorite herbs. This is a strong tranquilizer, nervine herb, has sedative properties. So it's good for pain, it's good for headaches, it's good for nervousness, insomnia, stress, anxiety, just feeling mentally overwhelmed. Valerian is excellent for. So it's often used as sort of a herbal sedative, okay? And now let me bounce over to a couple of other herbs that are definitely found in Africa. I want to highlight the African potato. This is found also, I think, in the southern part, so in the South African area. This boosts the immune system, helps with battling cancer, tuberculosis, asthma, HIV and AIDS, and a host of other chronic, really serious conditions. And so we know that even if we don't have any of these conditions, we know that this is an herb, right, that will help boost our immune system and help resist or fight off certain conditions. So that's why this one is important to take note of. Then the South African geranium plant, right? This is a plant that is used for chronic respiratory tract infections such as bronchitis, for sore throat, for sinusitis, colds, flu, and it has antibacterial and antiviral properties, okay? And then on this list also, and I'm sure I skipped over it, is aloe. But also we know that aloe is found, you know, in many places or many parts of the world. Most people use aloe topically for skin burns, sunburn, actual, you know, burns on the skin, but we know that internally aloe is good for the entire gastrointestinal tract, right? So it has sort of a mild laxative effect and can have a positive impact on aiding in digestion, okay? So aloe is one to make mention. Neem is another one, definitely found in the Western countries in Africa. Traditionally, or originally, I should say, it came from India, but through colonization, it moved to Neem, or got brought to different parts of Africa, and now grows readily there. We know that Neem is one that wards off mosquitoes and other insects. It's good for different tropical fevers. So malaria and yellow fever and these types of things, Neem is excellent for. Neem has a very strong smell if you get it in, say, the oil. However, it is used in a lot of hair and skin, I don't want to say supplements, but in a lot of hair and skin products. So it helps with different skin conditions. A lot of times they're fungal based skin conditions or scalp conditions and things like that. Neem oil is good for. They make it in soap. You can find it in soaps and things like that. So neem is another one to make mention of. And then lemongrass. So, you know, the lemongrass also grows on the continent. A lot of times people are only using lemongrass for the smell. Some people just love the aroma of lemongrass, but we know that it's also good for fevers, general weakness, for stomach aches. We know that lemongrass is also referred to or known as citronella. So it is also an insect and mosquito repellent, right? So lemongrass has a lot of uses. People cook with it, people use it in perfumes and body products and bath products and things like that as well. So I wanted to point those out. Each time we do these classes, sometimes I get questions of where to get these herbs or some of the herbs that are on these initial papers here. are not readily found. And if you've ever been on the call before, you know that my answer to that is to find you a traditional healer that specializes in herbs in your area. So I won't go over the rest of this handout, but just know that for certain conditions, they are listed along with herbs that help and have been known to traditionally treat these conditions. So you can use that for your own reference. This handout also is for your information. I think the most important part of this handout, it gives some general suggestions about how to use herbs and the safety of herbs and that sort of thing. But I think it's good to know how to, or what standard dosage is for herbs. And if I can find it, it will give you, here it is. So it'll give you, most things will have sort of what the adult dosage is for a particular formula. And this handout kind of gives a guideline as to how to dose children. So it gives you the age groups and what portion of the adult dose you would use for children. So I find that helpful. So you can refer to this as needed. This handout, again, I won't go over. These are herbs that I feel are just things that we should definitely have in our natural medicine chest. But because we have homeopathics to go over and superfoods and essential oils and that sort of thing, I won't go over this, but just know that some of my favorite herbs, right, are listed here. So we talked about ginger, valerian, cayenne, garlic, rosemary, charcoal, aloe vera, elder, peppermint, echinacea, golden seal, lavender, skullcap, nettle, crane's meal. All of these are on the list, and it gives an explanation of what each of these herbs do and why they're important, okay? So the next handout talks about homeopathics. Let's skip over that. Yes. So homeopathics is basically natural occurring substances, but they're used a little differently than your typical herbal tea or tincture or encapsulated herb. These are usually found in tablets or pellets, and you take them by dissolving them under your tongue, what we call sublingually. This way they go directly into the bloodstream through the mucous membrane or the lining in the mouth, right? And we know that homeopathic remedies is what pharmacology is based off of. So your pharmaceutical drugs, the way that homeopathic remedies are derived or made is how pharmacology came about. The difference being that homeopathic remedies are strictly natural occurring substances. Okay, and so this is just sort of 10 kind of most common, not necessarily the best or the only ones you should have, but these are 10 homeopathic remedies that are good to have on hand. The first one is allium. So allium is great for colds, hay fever, any condition where the symptoms are watery, runny eyes, nasal discharge, things of that nature, all right? Arnica, you can use both internally and topically. So this is more so when you have a pain from an injury, right? So you have sprained your ankle, or you've twisted or turned your knee, or things of that nature. So this deals with that. And then for topical, right, conditions, right? Arnica can be used topically. They make it in gels, ointments, sprays, that sort of thing. Chamomilla, this is great for people who are having trouble sleeping. It's often used in children's formulas for teething children, children who have colic, that unexplainable pain or just discomfort, right, that they have, which is usually a gas type issue. Could be from something the mother ate if she's breastfeeding, or it could be a problem from the formula that they're eating. But basically, this calms that crying, agonizing baby. Same thing when they're teething. But Also, I've used it for my children when we've traveled on the plane to help calm them down and kind of naturally sedate them, so to speak. But anytime you need to kind of have some calm. And I say, and it's listed here that it's more so used for children because there are other things that are more, I would say, powerful that maybe an adult could use. But for children, chamomilla becomes one of the favorites. Hypericum is another one. This is a remedy that's great for injuries, usually nerve-related injuries. If you stomp your toe or close your finger in the door, things of that nature, injuries that have shooting pain. Echinacea, this is excellent for psychological issues, people who are suffering from grief, anxiety, depression, mental health issues. Echinacea is excellent for. Magnesium phos, this is great for cramps. This is good for menstrual cramping, especially women's cramps during their cycle, but also any kind of cramps. It could be a male who's having cramps in his leg from overexertion or from working out or what have you. Nux vomica, this is good for treating overeating or over drinking. So if you are hungover or if you've eaten something that's bad or you've overeaten whatever type of food, Nux vomica usually gives relief, especially if you feel like vomiting would help or that there is a need to vomit. Pulsatilla is the next one. This is good for calming, they say women and children, I guess because we're so hysterical, right? I'm really kidding. But any situation where there is the need to kind of calm or gentle the mind. So this is for when there's a quick emotional change or state. This could be when someone is experiencing PMS or even menopausal symptoms, but this also could be for anyone who is experiencing some sort of change in their emotional state. Rus tox, this is good for pain from the initial movement after a sprain or a strain. This is also good for people with poison ivy. And then this handout basically gives the first aid treatments with homeopathics. So what remedies you would use if you're burned, what remedies you would use if you're bruised, if you have an eye injury, if you have a sprain or a strain, insect bite, heat stroke, things of that nature. So some of these we've already gone over. The good thing about homeopathic remedies is know that most homeopathic remedies will come with specific uses or indications, right? It'll give you whatever symptoms you're having and it'll say very clearly, this is the remedy for these list of symptoms. So it's very easy to use. And it's usually a situation where you can use it multiple times until these symptoms go away, because it's in very small pellets or tablets that you're using the homeopathics, right? And so the idea is minute dosages, multiple or frequent amounts of time. So a little bit frequently is the idea to relieve the symptoms, and then you spread out the time that you are taking the remedy. So I do recommend looking further into homeopathics, especially if you're not familiar or haven't heard of it. Even as an herbalist, my children have always taken to homeopathics much more than just herbs. It's very easy to administer with either children, infants included, children, and even seniors or elders. Anybody who may not be able to swallow encapsulated herbs, for example. Homeopathics may be the option because, again, you're simply putting it in the mouth under the tongue and it will naturally dissolve and it'll get into the body, into the bloodstream that way. It does not have to be swallowed or ingested and go through the entire digestive system, okay? So for those reasons, a lot of people will go to homeopathics rather than straight herbal remedies. So let me see what questions we have, and then we'll get into the superfoods and the aromatherapy. So there definitely could be side effects with herbs, but usually it is when you are taking prescription medications. So I would suggest going through that handout that was earlier in the presentation. Definitely, if someone is preparing for surgery, or if they're on blood thinners or certain medications dealing with blood pressure. What are some other common ones? So there are some instances for sure where you would be mindful of what herbs you may take, given, you know, whatever drugs you may be on. I'm putting my email in. Some people are asking if I've overlooked sending something, check your junk mail. I tried to really go through, and maybe I should probably check my junk mail, but I don't recall getting a request for handouts and not sending it. So let's see. Okay, so some people are explaining why they had to get off. Oh, yeah, I hope people can hear me. Yes, Pardiaco, Sister Denise is saying Pardiaco. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Pardiaco has been used a lot for cancer patients and have gotten some really good results from that. All right. Yeah, so again, if you're asking for copies of this information, you have to email me. Please do not put your email in the chat, and I will send it to you in the next couple of days. Okay, so, okay, so, all right, so I think that's all the questions I think for me. Okay, great. All right, so let's get into aromatherapy. There's a lot of information about essential oils. This aromatherapy chart, it was a chart that I photocopied. This, excuse me, this I like because it gives you the oil, it tells you what it's good to blend with, and it gives you the healing uses and the energetic uses for it. Because a lot of times people use herbs and essential oils and these things for spiritual healing and energy healing, you know, not just physical conditions, right? But of course, if none of that resonates with you, or if that's too far reaching for you to understand, you can simply deal with what aromas you like, what, you know, makes you feel good, what brightens your mood, what makes you feel, you know, better. These are the oils that you would want to focus on. The main thing to say about this is that essential oils are very highly concentrated oils that are derived from the flowering parts of plants. And we know that these different aromas basically affect the body, the mind, and the spirit. Usually you will need to, in most cases, you will need to dilute it. Now, of course, if you're adding it to a bath, you can certainly add the drops directly to the bath because the water is diluting it. If you're adding it to a diffuser, right? Now, I'm not sure if last time I showed you, this is one that I have here on my desk. I have other big ones, but in several rooms in my house, I have these diffusers, right? And so essential oils are usually, you can get combination blends, you can get individual herbs, oils, and you can use it in a diffuser. And of course, this is being diluted because, again, you're adding water. Keep looking at my picture and not putting it in front of the camera, right? But you're putting water in the diffuser, and then you're adding drops of the essential oil of your choice, right? And you're turning it on, and it's emitting the aroma into the air. If you're using it in hair or skin products, you're going to dilute it with whichever oil, what we call carrier oil, whether it's almond, apricot, coconut, grapeseed, sesame, avocado oil, but you're going to dilute it with different oils, okay? You may put it in a spray mister. Sometimes you just want to spray your space, your car, your office at work, and create a clean environment, a mentally, emotionally clean and pure environment. Same thing with how I've been making my sanitizing spray. I dilute it with alcohol, and I've used it for my hand sanitizer. I've used it to sanitize different spaces, areas, surfaces, things of that nature, where I have put the rubbing alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, along with different essential oils as a hand sanitizer or an air cleanser or purifier. But there are different ways to use essential oils. So those are a few, okay? People have used them as mouthwash, as vaginal douches, inhalants. You can buy these inhalants that have peppermint or eucalyptus or wintergreen and things of that nature that you can actually inhale directly, in the nostrils, that will help to clear the, airways, help clear sinuses, help break up mucus and phlegm and congestion. So there's so many ways to use these essential oils. So I've mentioned ones like peppermint and eucalyptus and wintergreen, but we also have other ones like clove, where you may not dilute it. You may add a drop or two directly onto achy tooth, or if you have a really bad fungus issue, you may add tea tree oil or clove or sage or something like that directly to foot fungus or some other kind of fungal issues. But this handout gives you sort of all of that information. I spoke earlier about ginger baths for aches and pains from the flu or for reducing fever. You can use the actual ginger root, but you can also use ginger oil, right? That you can just put directly into your bath or directly into your foot bath or into a bowl, and you put a cloth and you just soak the cloth with the infused water, ginger water, and apply it as a compress on the body. But there are many essential oils that people can use for many different reasons. People who are feeling overwhelmed, mentally exhausted, fatigued, things like that. All of the citrus oils are excellent for that. Grapefruit just came up on the screen here. And so it says this is great for mental exhaustion, for hangover. For people who are trying to lose weight, it's also good for fluid retention. So it can release excess water weight and things of that nature. It's good for cellulite. So you may add it to like a massage oil and help to, break up, cellulite and stuff like that. There are oils like lavender that are used to help with headaches, with insomnia, with tension, help heal cuts and bites and scars. Lavender is good for that. We've talked about lemongrass. So when we talked about it being insect repellent, you may make a spray mister with water or an alcohol base and add lemongrass if you need to spray yourself down, right? If you're going outside to deflect mosquitoes and things of that nature. So there are many, many uses for essential oils. I highly suggest using those and getting the benefits. We know some of the more spiritual, whether from the Bible or whether from traditionalists who use different oils like myrrh and frankincense and cinnamon and things of that nature. We know that myrrh, in addition to all the spiritual uses, is good for anti-inflammation or countering inflammation. It's good for coughs, it's good for bronchitis, mouth sores, diarrhea, right? We know that frankincense is good for mental fatigue, arthritis, aging skin, respiratory problems, right? And most people don't think of cinnamon as something that's spiritual, but it's very uplifting for your energy and for your mood. But also cinnamon is great as an antidepressant. It's good for its antiviral properties. It's an antibiotic. It fights off infections, colds, arthritis, and rheumatism. So these oils can be used for many, many conditions, okay? And the little block over here is blocking a lot of the stuff, so I'm having to refer to my handout because the screen is kind of blocked from the little boxes. So there are many others, and I don't know if you can see them clearly on your screen. But again, if you don't have the handouts, if you're not in the group and you want them, I posted my email, nanaakua1@gmail.com. You can feel free to request those. And as our time draws near, I want to talk about superfoods, okay? Superfoods are just what it sounds like. These are foods that are extraordinary, and they are extraordinary because they are highly nutritive foods. They have a lot of vitamins and minerals that are good for the body in terms of just getting your macro and micronutrients, right? But also, well, that's really why, but they actually will also help improve your energy, help you fight off or resist certain conditions and illnesses. But these superfoods are things that are highly recommended to add into your diet so that you can reduce stress and reduce your being prone to illnesses and such. I think there's two charts. So one are actual foods. One will be more of the berries and supplements and things like that. So let's run through the food list. We know that superfoods include almonds, right? Almonds are very high in vitamin E. They're a good source of protein, right? We know that broccoli rabi is a green leafy vegetable that is packed with potassium, iron, calcium, dietary fiber, vitamins A, C, and K. A lot going on with that one, right? And it even helps with certain conditions that they have listed. We know that avocado is an excellent source of the good fats or good oils that we need in our bodies, right? Raw milk, usually found in like kefir and some foods that are known in the Indian kind of lifestyle or diet. But these are foods that are high in vitamins A, D, C, and B. They also have a lot of minerals. Can't really find that here in the States unless you go directly to a farm because they pasteurize all the milk and usually you can't find raw milk. So you'll have to find it in a particular food and usually a specialty store that would have those types of foods. Or when you get it, you have to make kefir and things like that yourself. But one that is pretty accessible is wheatgrass. Wheatgrass is high in iron, calcium, magnesium, amino acids, vitamins A, C, and E. Salmon, we know, is a good source of the essential fatty acids, again, that we need, similar to the avocados, but it has the omega-3 and 6 in it, and is just considered an all-around good food to include in your diet. Flax seeds, we know, are high in vitamins B6 and minerals such as copper, phosphorus, folate, magnesium, manganese, and it has dietary fiber. We know that blueberries are good, full of nutrients like phytonutrients, vitamin C, and fiber. Cinnamon, we talked about cinnamon. I've talked about the essential oil just now, but we know that cinnamon is great to add into your diets because it suppresses and fights urinary tract infections. It soothes the stomach, improves brain function. It lowers your bad cholesterol, the LDLs, and it promotes healthy glucose metabolism. And I think last on this list is sweet potatoes. If you're going to do potatoes, because really most potatoes are high glycemic foods, and we'll talk about that, I think, either next week or the fourth week. But we know that potatoes are really starchy and have a high glycemic number, and you have to be cautious with those if you have blood sugar issues. But we know that sweet potatoes is the best, I think, potato to eat because it does have your beta carotene, it has your vitamins B6 and C, and it has fiber, and it's full of potassium. The next handout, this talks about these foods that are often added to like shakes and smoothies, maybe hot cereals, things of that nature. So the first one is the acai berry. The acai, right, it's become very, very popular. They even have these, here in the States, they have all these little raw juice bars where they don't just do juicing or smoothies, they actually have these fruit bowls with this acai, pureed acai berries, and they top it with all this other little stuff, right? But the acai is a good, it boosts the immune system, is known for just sort of getting the body, giving the body nutrients in sort of a berry that I don't personally think it tastes that great, but because it has high levels of antioxidants, it can boost the immune system and it helps fight cancer and heart disease. So I do consume it, not so much for the taste, and I think that's why they add other fruits and mix it with things, but it's really good. And people will usually add it to fruit smoothies and things of that nature. Goji berries, same thing, usually added to smoothies and such. Again, full of antioxidants, helps boost the immune system, helps fight off disease. Also high in vitamin C. Okay, another powder that again you would add to some kind of shake or some other food items. So similar to chocolate, cacao powder has flavonoids. So it's known to lower blood pressure, helps the blood flow into the brain and the heart. So it has an effect of the heart and brain and circulation and all of that, right? Seaweed. We know the seaweed is a sea vegetable. It comes from the sea, so we know it's full of minerals. It's also high in omega-3 fatty acids. So this helps prevent stroke and heart attack, right? So some people will eat it by itself. Some people will eat it with meals. You know, a lot of Asian meals will have seaweed in it. However, they have the dried seaweed that just comes in little sheets. My daughter just eats it as a snack. The next one is chia seeds. This one is, again, high in omega-3 fatty acids, high in fiber and calcium. A lot of times people are adding this, again, to their smoothies and cereals and such. And mangosteen, this is a fruit. And this has cancer-fighting properties, and it's also known to fight off inflammation. So it has anti-inflammatory properties. And I think maca, that's the last one. Maca powder, this one boosts energy, endurance, and libido. Okay, so those are two lists of superfoods, highly nutritive foods. If you're looking to improve your diet, but say you don't want to cut out meat, or you don't want to, or you're not ready to cut out sugar, which is probably even more important than cutting out meat. But these foods are, I think, a good place to start for someone who is trying to improve their diet but don't know where to start, because these are giving you a lot of nutrients, and it's going to help you overall boost your immune system, fight off antioxidants that cause different disorders and such, and then continue to work on weeding out or eliminating certain foods from your diet. The last thing I'll just cover is the goal, of course, this week was to help you identify, what different healing modalities exist and how to use them. So hopefully you can use this page as a recap. What herbs resonated with you, which ones stood out. You may go back over the list. You may jot down some that we didn't talk about, but that may address a health concern that you have. Same thing with the homeopathic remedies. Maybe some of the other nutritional supplements that were mentioned. It could include the essential oils. It can include the superfoods. You may decide that you want to do juicing and use some of the superfoods and some of the other fruits and vegetables that you know about in order to gain optimal health. And it also, just for your knowledge, you can go back, and this again is another way to kind of study and kind of test yourself as to what you learned. There were certainly different conditions that we talked about that you can heal with herbs, with homeopathics, with essential oils, with foods. See if you're able to jot down which herbs and things can be used for fever, for pain. Pain becomes a very big one. We're always trying to manage pain, right? Go back and see which herbs we talked about, which essential oils, what things help with pain, which things help with constipation, and so on and so forth, okay? So I hope you got some good information from this. I hope you will keep this information in a handy place. Next week, we will talk about stress management. There's no way to avoid stress. We do, however, have the ability to manage it. So if there were questions I didn't get to, feel free to email me, and I'll try to answer them as best possible. And I hope you'll join us back here next week. And until then, I bid you good health and peace, and have a wonderful rest of the weekend.
Yes, thank you very much, Nana Akua, for the good presentation. Also, enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you, Yvonne. Peace and love to all of you. Take care.
Okay, thank you. Up next, you have Dr. Wright Eileen. Dr. Wright.
Hi, how are you all? Okay, you'll see me momentarily.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, hi. Hello, everyone. I'm going to be sharing my screen momentarily as well so that we can get right into it. I'm going to be posting the revision of the syllabus and along with this week's readings. So for this week, we read, you watched The Journey of Man, A Genetic Odyssey, hopefully. And you also read a chapter that I posted from the book, Booker T. Washington in Africa, The Making of a Pan-Africanist. And essentially, we're going to discuss those two things. I think that there wasn't much conversation in the group about or maybe all three. Let me say that again. There wasn't a great deal of conversation about the film, but I want to just touch on a couple of things. I'm figuring out how to stabilize my technology here, so sorry if you hear a little sound. So I will just not recap, but just mention a couple of things as to why I put that in there, and then go through what you read in terms of the history of Pan-Africanism. That's really important for all of us, because one of the things that you should understand with this course, this seminar, is that we are not reinventing the wheel, so to speak. We are on a continuum in terms of the information and the work that we're doing with I Love Black People. And so hopefully, as a result of reading that chapter, you got a very clear understanding of that, in that this is not the first time that we have organized ourselves and attempted to deal with racism. Hello. Thank you. This is not the first time that we have organized ourselves and attempted to combat and fight racism. And so that chapter on Booker T. Washington, Pan-Africanism and Pan-Africanists gives you that context. And I'm gonna read just a little bit. I'll put it up on the screen because I don't know that everybody that's in here today, hello, thank you. I don't know that everyone in here today or on Facebook or all the places that this is being streamed actually has access to the chapter. So I will be sharing that reading so that everyone can actually join in and see, okay, what we're in fact talking about. So I'll do that momentarily. Matter of fact, let me just locate it and share it here. You can actually ask questions while I do that. You can put your questions in the chat. Let's do something a little different so that throughout while I'm lecturing, I can see some of the questions, comments you have about the reading since you've already done it, okay? But let me do that. Let me go open the chapter. So you're not gonna see me for a second, okay? But as I do that, let me talk about precisely what that chapter is from. So that chapter is from a book called Booker T. Washington in Africa, The Making of a Pan-Africanist. And yes, I am the author of that book. The impetus for that book was to basically highlight two policy cases where Booker T. Washington in particular had acted on behalf of African people. And I'm about to share my screen. Okay, hold on. You won't let me start? Okay, I can start my camera again. Okay, so Booker T. Washington was engaged in two policy cases involving African policy and impacting the African population around the world. Essentially, what I did in the book was make the case of how he had acquired this thinking and this ideation that would allow him to go on will allow him to go on to engage in these two cases. The two cases, which we will cover in this class, in this seminar, are the Liberian crisis and the African exclusion measure, both of which would have a significant impact on not just Africans in the United States, but on Africans abroad, right, globally. The first being Liberia. He's involved in negotiations that lead to the preservation of Liberia against the French, British, and German colonial forces on the ground in Africa that are looking to annex it. Hold on, let me change glasses. Okay, and then he is involved in another case called the African exclusion measure, where he is the person who challenges US foreign policy on Africa and forces them to basically dissolve an amendment attached to a larger immigration bill, which tried to exclude anyone of the Black or African race from coming to the United States forever. Okay, they're notable because he claims victory in both. However, you know, he is a very unlikely figure. And many people never saw him as someone who would do that. And I give you some background and understanding as to why he is or was, in fact, that person, okay? Both of those cases are very different in nature, but it is the evidence that provides us some insight into his thinking and his location in relationship to African people around the world, how he in fact felt about us, okay? And did that, and demonstrated that through action, okay? So we're not really fixating on Washington because I'm of the generation of scholars who is probably unlike others in the past where we have some kind of fixation on the person or icon worship, or, you want to deify a person. No, we are noting what he did for us, okay? And you all are not reading the entire book, so you don't get understanding of my position on that, but it's not about him, it's about us, okay? It's about African people. It's about Black people. And when you serve us well, it's not about I'm praising him, I'm giving the details of how he served our interests and using it as a model of how we can serve our interests going forward, right? So we're studying it as instruction and prescription and methodology and a strategy and tactic. So I'll stop there and I'll get into the chapter. I'll go back to the journey of man unless somebody wants me to talk about that. But I think the journey of man, a genetic odyssey, is self-explanatory, and my reasoning I don't know just yet, Joel. I mean, I have some resources. I actually engaged in some publishing, but hold on, let me, so, I think that the journey of man, a genetic odyssey, is self-explanatory, and why I also asked you all to read it, primarily because of the simple fact that it brings the conversation, it makes all of our boats rise, and in the understanding that humanity is African, right? First. So if anybody on here thought that race was real, we get that out of the way with you watching that film and establishing that race is in fact not real, and that we all come from the continent of Africa, and the differences between us are how and where we migrated to, and the environment and the impact of our diet and the climate in general, right? And so that has everything to do with our physical differences, but then also too, how we construct culture in those places, right? Our culture also contributes to, our general appearance, right? Because that's what we eat, okay? Where we are, how we preserve ourselves in various ways in life and afterlife even. So, that's why I showed that film, because I think many people do buy into the notion of race, but it is something, like I've told my recent students in the university, it is scientifically not provable race, right? There were World War I soldiers in the United States who refused the blood of Black soldiers, white soldiers, right? In World War I. They refused the blood of Black soldiers. And on the basis that, Black people are something other than human, right? Which couldn't be further from the truth. Well, very simply put, their ignorance sent them to eternity, right? Because they died. So, you know, sometimes the penalty for ignorance could be death, especially in the day and age that we live in. So I just wanted to make sure that coming in, if I was to say it was a prerequisite for this course, that would be a great prerequisite. Not to say that I'm endorsing Spencer Wells, I'm not per se. We are just utilizing him, right, for whatever information, data that he provides along the lines of DNA to prove what we know to be a very age-old theory about the origin of humanity, okay? And it puts us right back on the African continent, right? Where we should be. So that was the point of showing that film, and hopefully everyone digested. But you know, the commentary about, you know, science, I think I addressed that even before you watched it, okay? You know, science is a European thing, you know, they invent nonsense, okay? But you know, he's got to put his own dog in the fight, right? Like he's got to say, hey, my people did something, you know? So, you know, you ignore those things, but in real time, I stop him and say, like, that's not true. You know, I stopped the video. But okay, so moving right along, this chapter on Booker T. Washington in Africa, the Making of Pan-Africanist. Let me, Booker T. Washington in Africa, the Making of Pan-Africanist is the book. Booker T. Washington, Pan-Africanism and Pan-Africanist is the name of the chapter that we read this week. And the point of reading this chapter is for one reason and one reason only, to recall the history. So say somebody wanted to talk about 2020, 2021, where this huge pandemic, you know, impacted the world. But you would have to talk about all the social and political dynamics that were going on at that moment in time, all the players, all the voices. So you would attempt to recreate that moment in history. Well, that is in effect what I am doing with the ideology and the emergence of Pan-Africanism as a concept and ideology. I'm recreating that setting. Who were the chorus of voices? Who were the you know, players? What were the conditions, right? What were the circumstances that made African people around the world and in the diaspora say, we need to organize around this, okay? What were the conditions? What was the setting? So that's what I attempt to do. And why I choose this chapter is because, yes, I did write it. That being said, there probably is other texts that might be just as good. That's not the point. The point for me was, I know for a fact that this text covers the African world, from the Caribbean to, you know, Africans in Europe, African people on the continent, all of that, right? So I know that this chapter is tried and true, and I want to make sure I get a full account of all those chorus of voices in there, right? So that was the purpose, not really so much of a bias, like, hey, I want you to read my stuff. No, it's more or less functional. And, you know, I want, because this is a teaching course, I am teaching in here, I want to make sure that you come away with certain benchmarks, because there are a lot of people who think they know something about Pan-Africanism, but then, you know, and they will be very well versed and studied people. However, they will get the whole history of Pan-Africanism wrong, right? The first, you know, they'll mix up the first Pan-African conference with the congresses, what the difference was, you know, all of that. And you're shocked. I know some people like that. You read their book, you're like, what? You don't know the history of Pan-Africanism. You know, there's some nuanced differences there, but however nuanced they are, there's still important differences, right? So, and I'll get to that point, you know, shortly. So let me go ahead and share. I'm going to take myself out of here, and I'm going to share. Hold on a second. Okay, yeah, perfect. I'm going to share this chapter. Okay. Okay, so can everyone see that? Can you just let me know, or via sound,
Yes, we can
that
see
you can
you.
all hear that? Okay, perfect. So this was I also wanted you all to check out this quote at the beginning of the chapter, which to me is so Pan-Africanist in nature. And it is a quote from another book called The Story of the Negro, The Rise of the Race from Slavery. The citation is here it is at the bottom of the page, right? Booker T. Washington, The Story of the Negro, The Rise of the Race from Slavery, 1909. Okay. And this quote is written by Washington in the context of that book. And it says, there is, however, a tie which few white men can understand, which binds the American Negro to the African Negro, which unites the Black man of Brazil and the Black man of Liberia, which is constantly drawing into closer relations all the scattered African peoples, whether they are in the old world or the new. I have rarely met in America anyone of my race who did not, in one way or another, show a deep interest in everything connected with Africa. The millions of Negroes in America are almost as much interested, for example, in the future of Liberia and Abyssinia as they are in their own country. There is always a peculiar and scarcely definable bond that binds one Black man to another Black man, whether in Africa, Jamaica, Haiti, or the United States. Okay? So he is telling you automatically that he's got a very Pan-Africanist perspective. He's saying that there's a tie between us, okay? And that we are concerned with the welfare of each other. And this bond and this connection is something that other people who are not Black, who are not African, can rarely understand. But the fact that he mentions all together, Africa, Jamaica, Haiti, or the United States, he lets you know that he is making those connections between the continent and its diaspora out here in the Americas. So, you know, I thought that was very interesting. If I took his name away from there, most people would not be able to say who stated that. Because yes, in America, in the public realm, Washington is known as the accommodationist. And so most people, this is all taking place in his life clandestinely, his connections with Africa. And it gives him a lot of flexibility in what he actually does for African people and regarding the African continent in particular, because he isn't showing his hand, okay, so to speak. But this chapter, and I'm going to speed up, this chapter gives you some understanding of his ideation, which we're not going to fixate on. I'm going to jump quickly to the main points and then the conclusion of the chapter, because I do want you all, and you can write in the chat as you have questions about this chapter and its content, okay? So let me, okay, sorry guys. Hold on, I'm gonna stop the share because I've got to send a message. Hold on one second. All right, sorry guys. One moment. Okay, so I always hate when that happens. I have friends coming into town, and I have friends coming into town, and they are trying to reach me, but I want to tell them to just come on. Don't text me, I'm teaching, or call me. Okay. All right, so sorry about that, guys. Let me do that. Let me share my screen again. And let me put my thing on do not disturb. So let me see. Okay. All right, so what I was building up to was to say simply that all right. What I was building up to was basically to say that there is a moment in the Pan-African world where Henry Sylvester Williams out of Trinidad and Henry Sylvester Williams would contact Booker T. Washington and talk to him about this idea of Pan-Africanism. So here, we'll start here, and then I'll jump to another section and then hit the conclusion. So you get the high points, the major points that you should have gotten from this chapter. So it is with this level of developing consciousness that Booker T. Washington engaged the world. Shortly before the turn of the 20th century, he was formally exposed to the philosophy of Pan-Africanism, much in the same way as the rest of the world, through the coining of the phrase by the Secretary of the African Association, Henry Sylvester Williams. On behalf of the African Association, Williams wrote to Booker T. Washington for the first time in September of 1898 to solicit his support in their efforts to organize for the benefit of African people. He extended membership to Washington while enlisting his assistance in promoting the organization in the US. He wrote, "I take it you are alive to the necessity of a general union amongst the children and descendants of Ham, as it would tend to create a respect for us, which he believed did not exist." Washington agreed and was eager to promote the organization. The objective of the African Association, as described by Henry Sylvester Williams, was to respond to the need for unity amongst African people in order to garner respect in the world. The organization would make representations in cases of oppression affecting our people wherever found. During the latter part of 1898, the association began planning the first Pan-African Conference in order to advance their aims. In June of 1899, Williams wrote Booker T. Washington from London regarding the conference and enclosed a circular requesting that Washington or a representative of his choice present a paper on lynching in the United States. Washington accepted the invitation and promised to make it known as widely as possible. So a lot of people don't know that he was a promoter of the first Pan-African Conference, which was scheduled to take place in 1900. He not only promoted the conference through the Black press, he outlined the agenda and deemed it a very important movement on the horizon. So a movement, not just a conference, a one-off or anything like that. He had the vision to see this is going to be something, a major undertaking in the world. The organization's desire to create a body that would foster unification amongst African people internationally was a much needed and progressive endeavor, according to Booker T. Washington, and therefore worthy of his support. Washington did not hesitate to promote the conference before leaving London. He quickly wrote and mailed several letters to editors of Black newspapers in the US. One of the letters he sent in July of 1899 addressed the editor of the Indianapolis Freeman. Washington's objective was to promote the first Pan-African conference to the masses of African people in America. In his letter to the editor, he noted the British government plans to hold an international event where representatives from various countries would gather in London. He explained how the first Pan-African conference could benefit from the assembling of African people already taking place in England. It should be in England. Okay, so, I'm going to skip over the rest of that so you can see how that first initial contact happens. Henry Sylvester Williams writes to Booker T. Washington, and he details, the fact that they are planning this conference, and that they would meet in London in the UK. But that would be the formal meeting. What I want to move to here, so that would be the first formal meeting of its kind with the attempt to bring African people, Black people from around the world to that part of the world, and talk about coming together for the purpose of unity, and not just random unity, like, hey, we're all Black. No. For the purpose of garnering respect in the world and unifying so that we can protect ourselves. That should sound familiar to you. Protect ourselves from racism in the world, oppression already in the world. So let me just give you a little bit of what I tried to make a whirlwind tour of the Pan-African world as it is budding, as it is emerging at this moment in time, leading up to 1900. Prior to the first Pan-African conference, 19th and early 20th century Pan-Africanism in the US was espoused and practiced by individuals like Bishop Henry McNeill Turner, Martin Delany, Edward Blyden, Henry Highland Garnett, and Alexander Crummell. I'm telling you, essentially, there were people in the United States in particular who already, or in the Americas, because these men moved around, some of them. I'm laughing because I'm thinking about what Henry Highland Garnett said when he goes to I believe it's like Jamaica and gets some rest. And when he comes back, he says, I'm going to use all my energy to tear that empire down, meaning the United States. So he's certainly an African who's moving around the Americas, the Western Hemisphere, but moving around for the purpose of organizing himself and others to, get at this thing called America, which is a bastion of racism, not just then, but now, okay? So let me go back. My point of reading this part is to tell you all, give you an understanding of all the people in the various places, particularly in the diaspora, who are thinking the same thing and see that there is a necessity for us to organize ourselves for the purpose of eradicating our oppression everywhere we are, okay? So prior to the first Pan-African Conference, which is 1900, 19 and early 20th century Pan-Africanism in the US was espoused and practiced by individuals like Bishop Henry McNeill Turner, Martin Delany, Edward Blyden, Henry Highland Garnett, and Alexander Crummell. But as early as 1829, David Walker's appeal reflected on the history of African civilizations in Africa and made a connection between those in Africa and Africans scattered abroad. His appeal not only aimed to challenge the institution of slavery, but to educate the masses on African history and culture. Pan-Africanists amongst the African population in the Caribbean included the initiator of the first Pan-African Conference, Henry Sylvester Williams, who wrote Washington, right, of Trinidad, Marcus Garvey's mentor, J. Robert Love, and Dr. Albert Thorne from Barbados. But decades prior to their emergence, the Haitian Revolution occurred in 1804 and bolstered Pan-African consciousness in the diaspora as well. Haiti would produce Benito Sylvain and Antonin Furman, both whom met Booker T. Washington in 1897 and attended the first Pan-African Conference in 1900. Out of Haiti came a wing of Pan-Africanists who created literary discourse on diasporic philosophies on Africa. The African population in Haiti produced the gene explained that Haiti was the embodiment of the irresistible force of a united Africa. Let me stop there. Why? Why would he think that? Why would he say that? Because Haiti is no special place prior to the revolution. It is just a place like all of the Americas where Africans were brought to engage in the system of white supremacy and culture manifesting itself in a capitalist form known as slavery. And in particularly in Haiti, it was sugar, right? Sugar was produced, mass produced. So you had, just like you have all over the African continent, as many ethnic representations there, okay? Just like you would have in the United States, we would be from various regions and ethnic groups in Africa and find ourselves, much to our own chagrin, in bondage under these other folks in this foreign land, okay? But the difference with Haiti and just about everywhere else prior to the Haitian Revolution is that Haiti would have a revolution and unify. And yes, there were still distinct differences between Africans who were in Haiti. Just as I can recall historically in the United States that many of the insurrections, rebellions, and massacres that we engaged in against our enslavers had everything to do with the fact that we were different, but familiar with each other, right? So in cases where we are familiar with each other, ethnically familiar with each other, and yes, we are still consciously on many levels African people, right? So we know that we are from the continent of Africa. This is not erased by this time because there's still a steady flow of people coming from the continent in bondage to these places. So Europeans had to learn the hard way that when you put us in spaces together and we are familiar with each other's languages, but may not be from the same ethnic group, just like I always give this example, just like, I lived in Senegal briefly and I learned to speak on a at least rudimentary level Wolof, right? Wolof, what you call Wolof. That being said, everybody who was around me, everyone who was in Dakar was not Wolof. However, in terms of African languages in that region, the other ethnic groups that were not the largest, but still represented, could understand Wolof, right? So Pul, Panafuda, right, Fula, who are there, and even people from Guinea could understand, who were, at that time, 1 million people from Guinea were in Senegal and Dakar. So the point is that we were familiar with each other. We were not all Wolof, but you could understand Wolof. So yeah, this is, where there's insurrections Where there's rebellions, where there are insurrections, we are in collusion with each other to strategize around how to get free, right? And Haiti is the highest expression of that, okay, with the revolution. Because ultimately it would be the only place in the Western Hemisphere where Europeans had taken land, displaced indigenous people, and enslaved African people. This was the only place that was a free republic by and for African people. So there was no slavery in Haiti after 1804. You get to Haiti, you are free. Certainly up here in the United States, they wouldn't want anybody to know that, because then people would try to escape to Haiti, right? To this free African republic, okay? The only place in the Western Hemisphere who ceased to engage in slavery after 1804, and after fighting a number of wars against various European colonial nations, right? It's amazing, amazing story. I think that it doesn't get enough play in the world. And of course it doesn't get enough play in the world, primarily because of who we are as African people. And so people, have destroyed this free African nation in the Western Hemisphere called Haiti. Out of Haiti came a wing of Pan-Africanists who created literary discourse on diasporic philosophies on Africa. The African population in Haiti produced Jean Prince Mars and Louise Joseph, who repeatedly explained that Haiti was the embodiment of the irresistible force of a united Africa. Pan-Africanism had a dialectical characteristic to it, which allowed historic events like the Haitian Revolution to produce a response and rise in consciousness amongst African people internationally. What do I want to say about that? I want to emphasize dialectical relationship, because I think I said it before, but it needs to be reiterated. That is what we are doing right now. This is why we study stuff like this, because this relationship that we have while we're in dialogue with each other globally, communicating with each other across oceans to the benefit of African people, this is nothing new. We are in the tradition. We are on a continuum, okay? We are on a continuum. This is still a practice. This is a practice that our ancestors engaged in everywhere we were. On the African continent, they are communicating with Africans in the United States. Africans in the United States are communicating with African people on the continent, in the Caribbean, in Europe. Everywhere we are looking to communicate with each other, to problem solve, to strategize around this issue called really white supremacy and culture, AKA racism, okay? That has challenged our humanity and exploited us to the depths of our humanity as well, okay? So similarly, in 1896, the Ethiopian victory over Italian imperialist forces in the Battle of Ottawa also bolstered the connection between diasporic Africans and those on the continent. The social climate and consciousness of the African diaspora in the Western Hemisphere and throughout the world produced two of the most prolific Pan-Africanists, W.E.B. Du Bois and Marcus Garvey. Each of these men had important relationships and exchanges with Booker T. Washington. Marcus Garvey's relationship with Washington would open the door, both literally and figuratively, to the first mass organization of the African world through the Universal Negro Improvement Association. However, Washington's relationship with Du Bois would be inconsequential to the progress of Pan-Africanism. The relationship between Washington, the apparent accommodationist, And Du Bois, the Pan-Africanist scholar activist, has shaped African-American social and political history in the US for at least a century. Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Marcus Garvey would all function differently as Pan-Africanists. And we can do that, but still have the same objective, right? The methods they employed varied, but like previous Pan-Africanists, they all had one singular objective beyond unity, which was to advance the plight of African people in the face of oppression. Okay, so as we move towards understanding the stages of Booker T. Washington's development as a Pan-Africanist, we must revisit, define his relationship with both Du Bois and Garvey. While most focus on the continuous relationship between Washington and Du Bois, they had a 9-year relationship prior to the public break that appeared to be precipitated by Du Bois' book, The Soul of Black Folks. I'm going to stop there because I don't want to get into a tangent about Du Bois and Washington. I will just say this shortly, if you read the chapter, that the conflict between the two men was not what people thought it was. It was smoke and mirrors. And I'm not going to emphasize it here because it's not important and relevant to us. That whole pseudo conflict between Du Bois and Washington, it was created by other people, white scholars. It was continued in scholarship by them. But Du Bois later in life explains that it was none of that, that he in fact had a problem with Washington, but it was not the programmatic difference that people will go on for another 100 years and talk about. And this may only make sense to people here in the diaspora, the US, who are watching. So that's also another reason why I'm not going to belabor that point, because like, who cares, right? This is like how people exploit a conflict between two black people anywhere in the world today, okay? And although they could come out and clear up the issue, it's in the interest of white supremacy and culture, racism, to feed this pseudo conflict, right? To divide and conquer. So that's all I'm going to say about that. But however, Washington and Du Bois had a relationship, a positive relationship for the first 9 years that they knew each other. Washington and Garvey, who I have to discuss, and we will discuss because we cannot talk about Pan-Africanism and African nationalism without talking about Marcus Garvey, who would initiate the first Pan-Africanist, African nationalist, and let me say it another way, the largest and first mass Pan-Africanist and African nationalist organization, international organization the world has ever known. A massive organization that spanned the world. Let me just give you some imagery. So there goes Marcus Garvey, Marcus Mosiah Garvey, the founder of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, who launched the first mass organization of the African world from his base in Harlem. Jamaican born, of course, comes to the United States via the invitation of Booker T. Washington. He's coming to see this thing called Tuskegee, which is an institution. It was an institute at the time, a college. It really was founded as the Negro Normal School at Tuskegee. But what was significant about Tuskegee was simply that they had executed and put into play a sustainable model that they could export throughout the African world, and did have a lot of international students from the continent of Africa and throughout the African world, the Caribbean, Central and South America. So Garvey learns of Tuskegee at this conference right here in 1912, the first international conference on the Negro, held at Tuskegee, given by Booker T. Washington, which basically, asked for people to come from all around the African world And when I say the African world, I'm talking about everywhere African people, Black people are on the continent, in the Caribbean, Central and South America, in Europe, everywhere we are, in Asia, anywhere we are. That is what I'm calling the African world, meaning talking to the African people, the Black peoples of the world, wherever we are, right? So he's speaking to us. So he holds this conference at Tuskegee, and he asks for everyone affiliated and interested in Africa and African people to come to it. And what he does there is open up the industries. Tuskegee has 44 industries right there on its campus, on its land at the time. So a print shop, a mattress making shop, a shoe shop, the milk bank, you know, you name it. There were dozens upon the dozens of shops there on the campus. And what they wanted to do was open up and show all of its best practices and methods that they could share with the African world. And hopefully people will take these strategies or these methods back to their locale. But what also comes out of this conference is Washington, or what also comes out of this conference is in the resolutions, there is expressed the plan to initiate a Tuskegee-like institute in Jamaica, okay? And there are 8 educators from Jamaica who attend this conference. Marcus Garvey does not, okay? He does not attend this conference, but 8 teachers, educators from Jamaica were there. And they go back to Jamaica and share the word of the desire in the resolutions to erect a Tuskegee-like institute in Jamaica. Garvey takes up this work, and he actually begins to travel to raise money for a school. When people see that in historical documents, the school he's talking about is a school that people initiate in these resolutions here at the International Conference on the Negro. That being said, he initiates a relationship via writing with Booker T. Washington, and Booker T. Washington and him, Du Bois, have a about 3-year relationship where they communicate and they correspond and they share things. And they share, one of the meeting places they have in terms of their situation is that Garvey, although in Jamaica, and we know Jamaica is Black, there are still many Black people who are not who are not in line with Garvey's vision and mission. So, you know, he is attacked in Jamaica, okay? So he shares these things with Washington, but Washington says to him, come to Tuskegee, come see Tuskegee, come see what we are doing here, okay? Because it is a well-known hub for diasporic Africans in particular, but certainly for African people internationally. From 1893 on, there's a steady flow of students coming from the African continent to Tuskegee. So that is notable. So Garvey, let's get into the ideation of Garvey. Garvey is in Jamaica. At some point or another early in his life, he reads Up From Slavery by Booker T. Washington. He then writes, I am inspired. This book inspired me and informed me of my doom to be a race leader, okay, 1. 2, once he gets wind of this International Conference on the Negro from these 8 educators who attended it and understands that there's an intention to erect a Tuskegee-like institute in Jamaica, he begins to work on this, but he also structures the UNIA, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, after the Tuskegee model, meaning having multiple industries, because the philosophy of Washington was independence through industry, essentially own and operate, own what you consume. Own the industries that you consume. Produce what you consume. Okay. And if you will, you should hear this in some of the work you're doing. I love Black people, because, what we want to do is find those people who are us, Black people, African people, who provide businesses and services, good business and service to African people, to Black people, right? So, but what was happening as Tuskegee is that they are the educators of all of these industries, 44 industries there, right? Along with the academics, because it actually was a school for teachers. But Garvey is inspired by this model. And he says so. I don't have to speculate about these things because they're in the personal papers. And he essentially says he is going to model and does model the UNIA after the Tuskegee model. He does so and sends Booker T. Washington, can you guys still see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Sends Booker T. Washington a pamphlet listing the vision and mission of the UNIA, and tells him as much that you helped me structure this. You guided me. Your structure there at Tuskegee guided me. And finally, as they have this relationship, it is Booker T. Washington who extends the invitation to Marcus Garvey to come to the United States and come to Tuskegee so he can see this magnificent model, sustainable model for African people himself. Only one problem: Garvey would come 4 months after Washington died, but not before Washington would debunk, and we'll get to this because one of the cases in the book, or one of the cases that we're going to talk about as evidence of Washington's Pan-African caliber, and is something called the African Exclusion Measure, which I mentioned earlier. And it's important because that case is one of our models for understanding how we can advocate and how to advocate here, there, or anywhere for African people internationally, right? So the US would initiate an amendment to the larger immigration bill saying exclude anyone of the African or Black race from the United States forever, and put them in the same category as criminals and undesirables attempting to enter the country. And Booker T. Washington would have the power, the consciousness, and the people, the level of organization to go into Congress, challenge them, and have this measure amendment thrown out, changing the demographic of African people in the United States forever. Meaning, had this passed, and it did pass in the Senate, Garvey could not have come into the United States of March in 1916. So in January 1915, the US government tries to lock anybody coming from anywhere in the world who is African or Black from coming into the United States. Okay, let me be clear about that. They produced legislation to say no one who is Black or African can come to the United States after 1915. It is Washington and his Tuskegee machine, his secret network, along with his propagandizing that gets that measure thrown out. That's January 1915. It is the final, act that allows Garvey to come into the United States just a year and 2 months later. Okay, so the relationship between a Garvey and a Booker T. Washington is a deep one. He inspires him and informs him of his responsibility and role to be a race leader, but then he also has a model that Garvey duplicates, and some people say expands. He he has contact with him, and he gets an invitation from him to come to the United States, and before he comes, Washington destroys a bill, an amendment that would have kept him out of the United States. And so Garvey does make it to the United States, and first and foremost, he visits Tuskegee, the sustainable African model, and then he goes on to Harlem, where he attempts to build this mass organization, and he does. 47 chapters of the Universal Negro Improvement Association in the United States, and numerous chapters throughout the world. Everywhere African people were in mass, Black people were in mass, you found the presence of the UNIA via his mastery of one industry, printing, the printing press. He is able to produce a paper called the Negro World, and you would find it everywhere you find Black people, African people. And this is his sole tool in organizing the African world. No one has ever seen before or after the organization of African people on such a mass scale as when the UNIA, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, was at its height. Okay, so I'm over time. So let me just, well, I'm not over time, but I'm almost over time. So I'm over time in the sense that I want you guys to get some questions in. So let me just read the conclusions out for you right here. Let me scroll back to something, because I'll lecture next time on it just a little bit more. I mean, of course, Du Bois deserves a whole lot of conversation, because he is actually the person that, you know, gets us to the African continent in a very different way. Okay. Let me, hold on. And you can read the particulars, you know, go back and read the chapter so you can understand, you know, all of the notables about the nuanced relationship between Washington and Du Bois. But I am intentionally de-emphasizing that, because I don't want to perpetuate that. Like, we have to, you know, we've got our own issues. And so let's deal with our own issues. We don't have to deal with other folks imposing issues and planting conflicts within us, and then us, you know, perpetuating it. So let me just give you some important history here. So you all know about the first Pan-African Conference, right? 1900. At that conference, Washington and Du Bois were both scheduled to go to that. That's the one that Henry Sylvester Williams invites Washington, asks him to speak on, you know, lynching, and then turns around and asks him to speak on sustainability. Major, it's the first conference of its kind. That being said, in 1900, when that conference would take place, Du Bois would attend Booker T. Washington, although an organizer of it would not attend. Okay, and not for the silly public reasons that people think, oh, Du Bois attended, Washington didn't. No, they were in a good, productive mentor-mentee relationship at that time. So that was not it. Washington was already internationally known and very obligated and dedicated to the life of sustaining Tuskegee. So that came first for him. And so there's 101 reasons why he could possibly have not attended the conference, but Du Bois was not one. Okay, just to be clear. Two, Du Bois would be the youngest person at this 1900 conference. I know that's like, because I've been at a conference back in 2004 at given by the African Union, called the First Conference of Intellectuals for African Diaspora, and I was probably one of the youngest, if not one of two, the youngest people at the conference. That being said, Du Bois would not only be the youngest, he would be the sole survivor. By 1919, Du Bois is the only person alive from that 1900 conference. Okay, and we're gonna look at these documents, the conference, and the conference resolutions and all of that going forward. So in 1919, he does not forget the cause. This concept of coming together for the purpose of eradicating oppression. He doesn't forget this cause. Imagine if he forgot. Imagine if he didn't have the gumption. So he initiates, and that's what I'm highlighting right here, he initiates the first Pan-African Congresses, which are conferences, but continuous, which make them congresses. He has that vision. So he attends a conference in 1900, is the youngest of them all. And in 1919, he initiates the Pan-African Congresses with others, but he is one of the main initiators of it. And this congresses would be the think tank, would be the setting through which the Organization of African Unity would emerge. And is a very important vehicle because this is how we end up on the continent of Africa, having these conversations about the highest expression of Pan-Africanism being the total liberation of Africa from imperialism. Okay? And yes, it is the setting through which the OAU is the setting through which Nkrumah would assert that, right? So see, making the links here, this small little conference in 1900, which is sort of like the seed, but then the initiation of the congresses in 1919, and that go on to 1945, the most important of them all being the 5th Pan-African Congress, the Manchester Congress, where African leadership would assert the total liberation of Africa, and not just total liberation, but the unification of Africa. That still gives me goosebumps. Can you imagine what that means for us, right? When we truly come together, then we protect each other, we insulate ourselves, right? So the first Congress took place in Paris in 1919. The second Pan-African Congress in 1921 held meetings in London, Brussels, and Paris, in attendance with representatives from various African nations. The third Pan-African Congress was held in Lisbon in 1923, and the fourth Pan-African Congress was held in New York in 1927. The fifth Pan-African Congress, arguably the most important meeting, known as the Manchester Conference, was held in Manchester, England. George Padmore, H. McKenna, Kwame Nkrumah, Jomo Kenyatta, and Peter Abrahams led the Congress. It was a high point of the Congresses because for the first time, African leadership made a unanimous demand for total liberation and independence of the African continent from imperial domination. Okay? Du Bois, as a Pan-Africanist, would have a significant impact on the African world, particularly on the continent of Africa. Eventually, the Congresses would develop into the platform through which African leadership laid the ideological foundation for independence struggles on the continent. Du Bois was one of the Pan-Africanists who facilitated this ideological development through the Pan-African Congresses. He advanced an expression of Pan-Africanism that saw the liberation of African and its people as the ultimate objective. Marcus Garvey, also a Pan-Africanist, promoted nationhood for African people on the continent and abroad. However, his position was rooted in the philosophy of race, self-sufficiency, and the belief that African people throughout the world should unite in an effort to eradicate oppression. So I'm just gonna leave it there, right? Because I gave you a 2 for there. I'm gonna leave it there. Read the conclusions again for yourself. I'm gonna stop there because I know I'm over. And let you see me here. Can you see me again? All right. All right, I'm trying to get my camera back going, but it's not letting me. Okay, there you go. So the point of all of that is to say that the history of Pan-Africanism is both compelling and important. The thing you should take away from today is just understanding that we're not reinventing the wheel. We are not doing this for the first time. We are in fact on a continuum in a struggle that we have been involved in for centuries. And and maybe since the moment, you know, Europeans had the bizarre idea that they should capture us in our labor. We have understood that our unity was essential to our survival. You see it everywhere we are. That being said, there is a very specific history in terms of the emergence of Pan-Africanism with the objective. The bare bones objective is unity for the purpose of eradicating oppression and exploitation everywhere we are. Everywhere we are. Okay, the hair is doing a lot. Everywhere we are, right? And that was, when we look at all the Pan-Africanists, even the ones we mentioned today, that is the consensus. That is the bare bones consensus and understanding that that was our objective, and that is still our objective. And so I'm gonna leave it right there, because, you know, I could go on actually all day. There's always things I forget. I'm just gonna look at the comments. If you have a question really quickly, you can drop it in there and I'll try to answer it. Yes, absolutely, it's important inspiration. Yes, thank you. I agree with you, Augustine. Thank you. I'm glad. Okay. Who is this? Ali Toko Anai? Kanai. Okay. I hate to just go ahead and pronounce people's names because I don't like to. Claude, you might not find me on Facebook because the way, at the end of the course, I'll open up my stuff so that you can join me. But I think you probably have to be a friend of my friend already on Facebook. But I'm going to start letting people follow me on Instagram because, like, I actually finally do, you know, use it now. Sure, I'm glad this is inspirational to you. But hopefully you got some facts out of it, okay? Joel. You have a publishing question. I don't do that in this context, but I'm in a process of transitioning the publishing that I have. So as the class goes on, we can talk about it. At some point, you and I can discuss, okay? How many great families Africanist from ancient Egypt? I don't know how to answer your question, but there were many dynasties, right? There were about 30 dynasties in Kemet. And, you know, a dynasty is all people from the same family. Thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoyed the lecture this week. Thank you. Okay, so not a lot of questions, but I hope you, oh, okay, someone, all right, so you're writing a book on human exploitation. Okay, no problem, Claudie. I'd like to know more about you and your project when you get to that time. So no problem. Let's make sure we communicate before the semester is over. So this is week 2. We only have 2 more weeks, okay? And you'll be getting a lot of reading this week. Just on the line about your friends calling, it was to assume that unforeseen never gives touch in advance. For that reason, it's unforeseen. It's fine. Oh. Oh, thank you. Okay, yeah. Where are you, Felipe? The files, can you see the chapter? Are you in the, if you're in the course, if you're not in the course, write in the message so the admins can have you in the course so you can get in the course with, which is under I Love Black People, right? The organization. But, and I share all the reading materials in there. You'll have access, but I'm going to be reposting a lot of this stuff, reposting the syllabus again, because I made some changes. And I hate to hit you all over the head, but this is what we're here for. This is sort of an intense ideological course on Pan-Africanism. And so we really get into the, you know, dig deeper, right? With this chapter alone, I can now take you to the African continent where we start to delve into how this plays out in probably the most important context then and now, right? The African continent. You're talking about the heart of the world. And, you know, listen, I'm not afraid to say that. I don't care what other people have to say. Without a doubt, we know materially and in terms of population, you know, Africa is central in the world. It is primary, as Nkrumah would have said. And so this is the way I teach all of this, you know, meaning that as Africans in the diaspora, our focus, our attention should be towards Africa, not towards the Americas, not towards the Caribbean, not towards Europe. Why? Because that is the seat of our power. It's an undisputed fact. So many people are trying to wrestle Africa away from African people, because to hold Africa, to control Africa means to take yourself, sustain yourself today and take yourself into the future. So when we talk about Pan-Africanism, having its highest expression on the African continent, what we ultimately mean is Africa being and its resources and its human resources working to the benefit of African people first and foremost, okay? And protecting African people first and foremost. We got a lot of work to do, but we don't understand, you know, how unity plays into that. Our unity is all we need. It will insulate us. It will protect us. And I'll give you a lot of examples as we move on. So our struggle is working us out, working each other out, working our relationships out so that they're strong and intact. Our job is not really to humanize the rest of the world as much as it is for us to struggle ideologically with each other so that we can produce the unity that protects us in this world. Through I Love People, I Love Black People, but in every space and in every way that we needed to protect us, right? Okay, so, you know, listen, I could lecture until the sun goes down. Exactly. And you know, people in I Love Black People who are on the continent always want to engage around our ethnic differences. And I think this is such an important point because, you know, it is our struggle. That is our struggle. How do we come together when we have common oppressors who, you know, exploit and destroy our very lives on the daily basis? Okay, and there's less instruction about that and more instruction on how we're supposed to deal with other people as opposed to each other. And so I will, you know, we're going to deal with that and talk about that. So I'm responding to someone's direct message to me about the division in Sudan and the war in Ethiopia. And yes, and then religion starts to play into this, right? All right, so ethnic politics, which is really a racialized and ethnic politics playing out under the cover of religious ideology. Thank you for your time. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. Yes, all over the continent we have examples, and that's why this is a great seminar to be in, because I do provide instruction. We're going to talk about that. You know, I'm going to talk about one of our greatest intellectuals on the continent and leaders of a people's struggle, armed struggle, who had some solutions and understanding how to make a people who have been ethnically different since the dawn of humanity. How do we come together at this moment in time? Because we shouldn't be remiss in understanding how old we are. That was the point of me showing the journey of man, a genetic odyssey. We are an old people. We have been on the earth the longest. We have the oldest relationships, but we also have the oldest conflicts. And we are the oldest neighbors, okay? And we are the oldest family members, right? And you know how the saying goes, nobody can fight like family. Yeah, so now these very recent people who only been around, we've been around 200,000 to 300,000 years, and most of that time on the African continent. And here comes these very young people in the last 7,000 or 8,000 years, and in the last, called meaning Europeans, and then in the last 400 years, 400 or 500 years, have caused complete chaos in the world with this racial pathology, right? Now, no problem, because what we're going to do is we're going to come together to deal with them and, you know, the impact of their pathology on our people and our world, because it is our world, you know, if we are in fact the human beings. That being said, you know, that is necessary, because it is like the clear and present danger, right? But we shouldn't forget who we are. We shouldn't forget that we've been here forever in human terms. We shouldn't forget that they are very recent, that what, and you know, and that, yes, this is the moment where we overcome our historical challenges that created divisions that are not advantageous to us, because we shouldn't be homogeneous anyway. However, we don't want our differences to work against us in the face of a common oppressor and opposer, right? So I'm going to leave it there, because like I said, I could go on until the sun sets. So next we start looking at those evidentiary chapters, but we start looking at the proponents of Pan-Africanism on the African continent and how that plays out, and how we organize and deal with these very issues. And nobody should ever forget that we were victorious on the continent in ending colonialism. It is neo-colonialism where they co-opt our minds that we are struggling against. So we are still a victorious people. We just have work to do. Okay, so that's the end of it. I'm going to go. We'll see you next week, and we'll be posting all the readings for the course in the WhatsApp group. If you are not in the group, please talk to the administrators and see about getting into the group. And yeah, so, and then I will see you all next week, and I'll be talking to you in the group. Okay, all righty. I am because we are.
Yes, thank you very
Bye-bye.
much, Dr. Wright.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.